It would have been science fiction not too many years ago, the exchange of vital organs between human beings. And yet today the concept of transplantation seems routine, except to those whose lives depend upon it.
You can't get your mind around the idea that they're going to take your liver out of you and put somebody else's in.
Behind the scenes is a delicate ballet coordinating the efforts of the families of donors and medical teams often separated by hundreds or thousands of miles.
Every transplant probably requires sometimes 50 phone calls between the donor team, the recipient team, the patient, the organ procurement agency, the other hospitals, etc.
Despite increased awareness, demand continues to outpace supply, leaving hundreds of Oklahomans on waiting lists. On this edition of Stateline, their one hope and prayer:
let me live.
Denise, and I said, yeah. This is Mary at the hospital. She goes, we have a liver for you.
When I began working for the United Network for Organ Sharing some 22 years ago, there were about 7,500 people on the transplant waiting list. And nationally, there was a lot of discussion about the crisis in transplantation. As of this morning at 9:45, there are 94,621 people on the national transplant waiting list, waiting for 101,000 organs. Now, if there was a crisis 22 years ago, it must be a disaster today.
Actually, one old surgeon from Mayo Clinic, he was one of my mentors, and he told me, if you look at the future, only two fields are going to really be increasing and being on the edge. One is trauma and transplantation, because people are not going to be willing to accept to die because one organ only is failing.
Right now, about a third of Oklahomans have signed up on the registry.
It's a very small detail that somebody has to do when they sign their name for their driver's license. Doesn't take any time at all, but it's a gift, and it could save somebody's life. It could be a matter of life and death.
The more that I do this, the more that I do this job, you kind of realize that Oklahomans are people that they're just very giving people, and in that worst time of their life, they want to try to help somebody.
In January of 2001, Denise Allen Kane woke up to find that she couldn't walk and was very disoriented. Her husband had already left for work, but she was able to crawl to a phone and call her parents.
She really was out of it. She didn't make any sense at all. She was laying on the floor. I don't know how long she'd been there, and she didn't know either.
With liver disease, It came on so suddenly, and I really didn't have any clue as to, you know, what happened or anything.
She was just so toxic. She didn't make sense when she was talking, and so I immediately called the ambulance, 911.
They took me to the hospital by ambulance, and that's when we found out I was in liver failure, and big-time liver failure.
She was really yellow. Her eyes particularly were very yellow.
Your liver produces vitamin K, which is your clotting factor. And without that, you bleed. You have a hard time clotting anytime you get a cut or anything. Not only that, but you develop ascites, which is fluid buildup in your body, and my ankles would get this big. You know, liver disease is horrible, horrible disease. I was in denial. I'm not going to need it. Oh, no, I'm not going to need it. No. Nah, I'm going to be fine, you know. You know, it's total denial. You can't get your mind around the idea that they're going to take your liver out of you and put somebody else's in. And you're going to be okay. It's really hard to imagine that. I mean, I knew I was sick, but I'd been sick before. You know, you get better, you bounce back, you get better, you know. You don't. You get worse, and you get worse. And then to have to go through another phase as to after you get on the list, and it's the waiting, you know, the waiting. From the time I got on the transplant list in February, the end of February of '02, I started getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And in April, I mean, I was really having a lot of the confusion and the mental breakdown on what was, you know, things that were going on around me.
Every day we'd wait to see if the phone was going to ring, which it didn't. And we hoped, we didn't want anyone to die, but someone was going to have to do that in order for her to live.
They wouldn't do it here. They refused to do me the transplant here because they said of prior abdominal surgery, that they were afraid of when they got in there, they could find scar tissue, which might hinder doing the transplant. And that's the basis that they turned me down here. It's not the people who have been on it the longest, it's the people who are in the most need. They take your creatinine, which is your kidney function, your bilirubin, which is your liver, and your protime, which is how fast you clot. And they factor that and assign you a number, and between 0 and 40, and the closer you are to 40 are the most in need. And when I went to Denver and went through all their battery of tests, I was a 21. And then actually transplant, I was a 28. So the closer you get to that 40, you're in bad shape. They put me in the hospital in Midwest City. And the doctors there were in constant contact with the people in Denver. And they said, get her here as soon as you can. They got me to Denver. And then that's when the waiting really started for me. And I remember my mother's cell phone ringing, and picked it up, and she says, Denise? And I said, yeah. She said, this is Mary at the hospital. She goes, we have a liver for you. And you just go, oh my God. And I mean, I remember I got up and I did this little dance and I said, oh, it's liver time. I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared. I wasn't apprehensive. I mean, I was just, let's just do this and let's get it over with. Because this was my chance to live again. I remember laying there and my husband was there, and I looked at him and I said, I made it. And he goes, you did? And he goes, look at you, honey.
She looked a whole lot better. I mean, just a couple hours of good liver functioning had already started cleaning her up, and she looked completely different.
Well, I've pretty much returned to normal. 6 months after the transplant, doctor says, you can go back to work. You're healed.
Today, Denise is back on the job, She's a receptionist at OETA, one of our own and one of thousands of lives saved by the generosity of a stranger.
All I know about my donor is that it was a 48-year-old man, and he lived in the Denver area. And what a wonderful, wonderful man, you know. His family, you know, I think about it. It's every day I think about it. It's something that you don't get away from. To be so blessed to have a second chance at life.
Well, every hospital is required to refer all deaths to the designated organ procurement organization. So we get a call and we'll pick a hospital. We'll say OU Medical Center. And they call and they say, Mary Smith has been in a car accident and we're about to pronounce her brain dead. So we'll send staff down to visit with the family and to explain to them, once their loved one has been declared dead, the options of organ and tissue donation.
When I first started this job, one of the hardest things for me to grasp was these people were going through probably the most tragic time of their life, and I'm supposed to walk in and ask them, you know, for something, and but it's not like that. You know, you basically are going in and just giving them another option of donation.
The most important thing from my point of view is that until family with their attending physician have already made the decision to withdraw care.
Once we get all that, then we pull our list and start making our phone calls. And once we've placed each organ that we believe we're going to be able to place, then we turn into a travel agent. We start coordinating planes and cars and getting everybody landed and at the same place at the same time.
Every transplant probably requires sometimes 50 phone calls between the donor team, the recipient team, the patient, the organ procurement agency, the other hospitals, etc. So it's a very complex process.
There are a number of factors that determine the order in which patients print out. Length of time waiting is one factor. Severity of a patient's
There's no chance of cheating going up and down. It's purely numerical.
Typically, we run a list. It goes locally, sickest first, then it goes regionally, and then it goes nationally.
You're matched based on blood type, ABO, blood type compatibility. Weight can be a factor. You know, you can't put a heart from a 2-year-old into a 60-year-old man. You know, so relative size is important. Seriousness of your illness, length of time you're expected to live without a transplant.
Because transplantation has become so successful, heart, lungs, kidneys, liver, pancreas, and other tissues. Because now they test for HIV, hepatitis C and B, and HTLV1.
When a patient's been pronounced brain dead, you kind of have a window there that you need to try to get all your testing done, get all your organ placement done, and get to the OR. Organs. I mean, the body just...
At 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'll be driving, and the first thing that comes to my mind, what am I doing here? Why did I choose this profession, you know? And then when you do the procedure and you see how the patient just almost suddenly changes life overnight, it's that it's really beyond any physical or mental fatigue, you know. And that's what keeps you going, I think, is really seeing people get better fast.
About 600 of the 94,000 people on the national waiting list are Oklahomans. Last year, 224 organ transplants were performed here, but 49 Oklahomans died waiting.
We don't really have that problem on the stem cell side of the transplantation, because we're using living donors. We're usually using siblings or an unrelated donor that comes off of the National Marrow Donor Program that has volunteered to be a donor. The primary diseases that we treat with bone marrow or stem cell transplant are blood diseases, like they have leukemia, they have a bone marrow failure syndrome like aplastic anemia, they may have a Hodgkin's disease or non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so those are all diseases that affect the bone marrow. So we really just need to get rid of the bad bone marrow and give some healthy, functioning marrow back. Hello? And how are you two ladies? They get that chemotherapy and the radiation, and that takes about a week. The chemotherapy is all given intravenously. The radiation is given twice a day for 4 days in a row. And then if we're using a sibling donor, on the day of the transplant, the sibling goes to the operating room, and that's when we take the bone marrow. When that's completed, the transplant itself is very anticlimactic, because the bone marrow or the stem cells just come in a bag and they look like a bag of blood, like a blood transfusion.
This is the mustard seed that my best friend gave me to, symbolize the mustard seed of faith.
Martha Collar started a scrapbook when she was first diagnosed with leukemia in 2005.
Toward the end of August, I started just really feeling bad, having fatigue and feeling really weak and kind of like the flu. And I went on the internet and on Sunday afternoon, and I just Googled the word cancer, and I went to the first website that came up, and I went straight to leukemia. I still to this day don't know why I went to leukemia, but I went to that. And sure enough, there were every one of my symptoms right there. First I started hypertension. The doctor the next day, they did a blood test. This was on a Monday. They found out the results on Tuesday, and by Tuesday afternoon I was in the hospital. Because that's how acute leukemia is. I mean, it's acute, so it's very fast. So, they have to start treatment right away, because in 3 or 4 months you're gone without treatment.
After chemotherapy, Martha was in remission. In the summer of 2006, the leukemia returned, and a stem cell transplant became the only option.
I did a little research, and I found out that OU Medical Center's outcomes were really slightly better than MD Anderson's. So I was able to stay here, which I was really glad about, because, why go to Houston when you have a quality transplant center 2 miles down the road from where you live? So, I mean, it just would have been a huge inconvenience, not to mention expense to my family to go down to Houston. It just looks like a bag of blood. And because a lot of people, you say the word transplant and they think surgery. It's not a surgery at all. It goes into you like you would get a bag of blood. So the transplant itself is really pretty uneventful. It's the after effects that can be serious.
You don't realize how good you have it until that person's gone for up to like 3 months at a time.
Martha's son is in chef school, so he's doing the cooking at home. Cancer has given her an
You just draw strength from wherever you can. You find that you have strength that you didn't know you had. Initially, when I was first diagnosed, I was completely overwhelmed by the love and support of friends and family members and coworkers, and I mean, it was just completely overwhelming. If you ever wonder how much people care about you, just get cancer, because you find out really fast.
One night, coming from the hospital in the parking lot, and I remember this like it was last night. It was cold. It was very dark, and I just, for some reason, as I was going to my car, there's a Beatles tune that just popped in my mind, and it's on a dark, cloudy night. There's still a light that shines on me. And it just seemed like it was like a hymn, sacred words, and I realized at that moment that the light is from all the outpouring of friends.
It's scary, because AML has just about one of the worst
has about the worst prognosis of any type of cancer. There are a few that are worse, but not many. With AML, you're initially told that you have about a 30% chance. So it's not good. It's not the good kind of leukemia to have. There's the chronic type and there's the acute type, and the acute type is not the good kind. It's not the kind you want to get. This anti-rejection drug this bottle is like $800. But fortunately, you know, insurance covers most of that. So, but yeah, if a person did not have health insurance, I can see how it would just be really difficult. The first 100 days after transplant are the most critical because that's when you're most at risk for infection. So right now I'm on antibiotics, antiviral drugs, antifungal drugs, anti-rejection drugs, you know, all of that. And I'll be on most of those for about a year. And then today is day 55. So I'm a little over halfway there to the 100 days. With AML, if you can go 2 years, especially 3 years, you're pretty much out of the woods. Unlike other forms of cancer that can come back, you know, years down the road, AML is a fast developing cancer, but it's also quicker to cure. So if I can go 2 years, especially 3, you know, we'll be having a big party.
There's talk of growing organs from stem cells. There's talk of artificial organs. If we have to depend on the supply of donor organs from people who die in this country, there will never be enough. And yet even today, we're probably only getting 50% of the organs that could be available.
Where an embryonic stem cell has the potential to really grow an entire human being, these are a little further down the road of differentiation and will grow new bone marrow, and they may grow some other tissues, but they're not especially efficient at that. There's some research being done to see if they can grow new heart muscle or even brain cells, but that's very investigational.
We work with a company called LifeCell that processes skin, and the uses for this skin are absolutely amazing. They process this skin in such a way that they remove from it any of the properties that would make someone else reject it, the biologic properties. They use this product they make from the skin, and if they, for instance, wrap it around a ruptured Achilles tendon, the body turns that skin into tendon cells. If they use it to patch a hole in a baby's heart, it turns into heart muscle. If they use it to patch a defect in bone, the body turns it into bone.
There's some stuff coming down the pike as far as transplant itself where, you know, they do pancreas transplant, but there's another procedure called islet cell transplant where they'll take a whole pancreas and spin it down and just get the islet cells, which are the cells that produce insulin. And then they'll inject those into the portal vein of the liver, and the islet cells just go inside the liver and kind of set up shop and start producing insulin. And so that may be kind of the thing that down the road that is the treatment for diabetes.
The use of umbilical cord blood is going to be a growing area. The problem with umbilical cord blood is that umbilical cords, you know, it's less than half a Coke can volume. That's difficult to expect that marrow of an adult. But if it could be expanded outside of the body, you know, grown in a bucket until you had enough of it and then give it all at once to an adult, that would really be a major advance.
Those advances are at the forefront of research going on right now in Oklahoma. Advances that one day will answer thousands of Oklahomans, all with the same simple prayer.
The knowledge that something good came out of an otherwise senseless tragedy, that lives were saved. And I've always been amazed by the families that, in the spite of personal tragedy, at the worst moment of their lives, they can make a decision that will spare other families from having to suffer as they're suffering.
The organ donor indicator on the Oklahoma driver license begins the donation process, and it's an important reminder for the families of potential donors. But theirs is the final decision, so it's important to have that discussion well in advance of any tragedy so that no time is lost in answering the prayer of the thousands who remain on transplant waiting lists.
Let me live, let there be sunshine. I can't recall a brighter day, a time where things had gone my way. Let it rain all through the springtime, and in the summer I'll be found. I used to never come around before you draw conclusions about the type of tree I am. I think that you should understand I took a fall. I lost everything I had. I can't recall a darker day. You can't imagine feeling this way. Let me live, let there be sunshine. I can feel it warming me. In my reflection you will see each drop of rain falls in the springtime, and in the summer I'll be found. I used to never come around.